Hello everyone, welcome to the Wuxia Audiobook. Today, we will continue to the next part of the series Renegade Immortal.
Chapter 71, 4 years. With Wang Lin's current cultivation, he didn't need to sleep at all. After lying in his bed for a while, he sat up and looked at the moon outside his window. He waved his right hand and took out a gourd, then drank a big gulp from it. Wang Lin muttered to himself, the amount of spiritual energy needed to break through from qi condensation to foundation building is simply too great. It is time to start gathering dew. Situ Nan asked, "That's right. Hey brat, when do you plan on going to find a wood element to help complete the heaven-defying bead?" Wang Lin pondered for a while, then said, "First, I'll find a place nearby to prepare to break through to foundation building. Then, I'll have to see how things are going with Zhou Peng. If nothing unusual happens, I'll leave this place." The night passed in silence. For the next few days, Wang Lin spent time with his parents. After half a month, Wang Lin left. After the reluctant farewell of his parents, he left in a rainbow-colored light. Wang Lin felt very gloomy when he left. He didn't know when his next chance to come back home will be. It might be in a few years, or he might not come back ever again. Originally, the place he planned to use for closed-door training was the cave with the hole in the wall, but he decided against it. Unlike other cultivators, he needed water in the cave, otherwise, no matter how rich the spiritual energy was, it would not be a good enough spot. Also, it was very close to the Hengyue mountain, so it was too dangerous. After searching the surrounding area, Wang Lin found a cave near the top of an empty mountain. There was a pool of underground water and lot of animal droppings in the cave. It seemed wild animals visited this area a lot. After carefully checking the cave and making sure that there was no other exit, Wang Lin quickly used the attraction technique and sealed the cave entrance with rocks. As a result, the cave became completely sealed and Wang Lin began his second closed-door training. After he started his closed-door training, time flew by. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Without him realizing it, 4 years had passed by. As for the remaining people of the Hengyue sect, they gradually forgot about Wang Lin, thinking that he had died. Lu Wenju and the old woman regretted letting him out. The one who was most happy about this matter had to be Lu Song, because he managed to become the senior disciple of that small group. As for Huang Long and the others of his generation, they never had much contact with Wang Lin to begin with. They only noticed Wang Lin due to recent events, so, after 4 years, they had completely forgotten about him. During the first year of Wang Lin's closed-door training, he kept in contact with Zhou Peng and found that all the foundation building and above elders were in closed-door training in the back mountains, so no one found out about what happened to Zhou Peng. In addition to this, he had his status as the senior disciple of the Xuan Dao sect, so none of the disciples dared to mess with him. This allowed him to gather information and secretly take care of some disciples that had ill intentions toward Wang Lin. With Zhou Peng secretly taking care of these people, Wang Lin gradually faded from everyone's memories. The entrance of the cave that Wang Lin was cultivating in was now covered with plants, making the cave impossible to detect. In these 4 years, the entrance to the cave became a gathering place for various animals. Some even sat outside the entrance and cultivated. On a certain day, 2 rainbow-colored lights flew toward the cave. 2 male and 1 female appeared from the light as they stopped near the cave. The person in front was a middle-aged man wearing black. His body stopped in mid-air with a green flying sword under him. The sword released a cold aura that would cause fear in others. Next to the middle-aged man stood a young girl. The girl was very attractive and her voice was very clear. "Third senior brother, you have to help me find a crystal spirit beast. The competition to enter the back mountain is soon and I need a good wood crystal spirit beast to refine into a sword spirit. With that sword spirit, I'll win for sure." If Wang Lin saw this girl, he would find her to be very familiar. This was the female named Su who was secretly in love with Wang Chiwo. She had now grown from a pretty teenager to a beautiful woman. The middle-aged man was in a trance. He suddenly regained his senses and said, "Junior sister, work hard and strive to get into the back mountain. After I help you capture a crystal spirit beast, I'll have to go into closed-door training." There was another teenager who stood next to the girl. He was very young and was clinging to the girl. He said, "Senior brother and sister, you two are flying too fast. I can't even keep my eyes open. Since we are here already, let's go down." The girl named Sue said, "Junior brother, didn't you say that you had follow? I already told you that your cultivation isn't high enough. Just this speed and you can't stand it." The middle-aged man turned, looked at the two, and said, "Junior brother, your talent is good, but if you can't even stand this little bit of hardship, how will you cultivate in the future?" The youth was clearly very afraid of the middle-aged man and said, "Third brother, I know I was wrong." The girl named Sue tapped the youth's head and said, "Junior brother, just wait a bit. Once we capture the crystal beast, we can return to the sect." The youth quickly nodded and whispered, "Senior sister, you are one of the Xuandao sect's geniuses. You managed to go from the 4th layer to the 7th layer in only 4 years. This time, after you capture the crystal beast and refine it into a sword spirit, you will become one of the experts in the Xuandao sect. You'll have to help me when Li Shan bullies me in the future." The girl shook her head and wryly smiled. Speaking of geniuses, elder brother Lu Feng is definitely one. He has almost caught up to senior brother's cultivation and is going to break through into the 13th layer soon. There is also elder sister Lu Mei, who has already reached the 12th layer. They were all originally Xuandao sect disciples, so they naturally have access to the back mountain. I'm originally from the Heng Yue sect, so I have to fight for one of the remaining spots in the back mountain. I hope I can win this time." The middle-aged man let out a snort and disgruntledly said that Bat Lu Feng only grew so fast because he was able to enter the back mountain. It was only because the ancestor had his eyes on the Heng Yue sect's back mountain that he made it this far. If it wasn't for the ancestor, how could Lu Feng grow so fast? Even if he has great talent, without a great amount of spiritual energy, it would take years to break through. The girl named Sue smiled and changed the topic. "Third brother, look at this place. I remember it being very different from before. Why are there so many wild animals cultivating around here?" Chapter 72, Seizing Foundation. The middle-aged man looked around for a bit, then muttered, "This place is indeed strange. 2 years ago, there was a sudden burst of spiritual energy which attracted these beasts. Since then, waves of spiritual energy have been sent out from around here. That is what attracts the beasts." The youth's eyes suddenly lit up. He said, "Elder martial brother, could there be a treasure here?" The middle chuckled and said, "There were some elders that also thought so, but after searching for a while, they determined that the release of spiritual energy was a natural occurrence." The youth sighed in disappointment and said, "That is unfortunate. If only there really was a treasure here." The middle-aged man let out a laugh and said, "It's getting late. I'll catch a strong crystal spirit beast, then we can go back." With that, the middle-aged man spread out his divine sense and found 7 to 8 crystal spirit beasts and began to observe them. Just at that moment, all of the beasts that were cultivating suddenly started to move, as if something startled them. Some even began to growl. Gradually, the number of growls began to increase, until all of the beasts were roaring. Their roars were directed at a vegetation-filled cliff. The middle-aged man was stunned. Before he was able to call his fellow disciples to quickly leave the area, a huge divine sense swept past them. The middle-aged man's face changed greatly. Even with his 12th layer cultivation level, he felt completely powerless under this divine sense. The girl named Suze, who was next to the middle-aged man, face turned pale. The flying sword under her feet flashed and fell to the ground. The girl and the youth hugging her also fell to the ground. The flying sword under the middle-aged man also faltered and he had to use all of his power to maintain flight. He took a step and grabbed the 2 falling people before landing on the ground. Just this simple action caused him to be drenched in sweat. After he landed, he quickly clasped his hands and said, "Junior is Xuandao sect's disciple, Li Hai. I didn't know Senior was cultivating here. Please forgive us." The girl named Sue also noticed the divine sense. It caused her to lose control of her flying sword. She respectfully said, "Junior is Xuandao sect's disciple Su Fei." The youth was so scared that there wasn't any trace of blood on his face. He stood there, clenching the girl's clothes, not daring to speak. All of the beasts also felt chills when the divine sense spread across them. All of them revealed looks of shock and fear. They lied on the ground, not daring to move. Xuandao sect. A very old voice echoed from the surroundings. It was hard to tell whether the voice was happy or angry. The middle-aged man groaned. If he was by himself, he could have just escaped when he found that something was off, but now, with a junior sister and a little junior brother here, if he were to run away, then their masters would definitely hold him accountable. He could only hope that, because the Xuandao sect was so close and that they hadn't done anything to offend this senior yet, the senior will not do anything. After the senior said that phrase, he began to think. The middle-aged man clenched his teeth and decided that his life was more important. If the senior started to act with killing intent, then he was going to save himself first. Su Fei's forehead was covered in beads of sweat. She got very nervous when she saw her third elder brother, who was always calm, scared pale. She hesitated for a while, then said, "Senior, Junior hasn't done anything to offend you." "You?" Before she could finish speaking, the old voice let out a surprised sound and said, "You said your name is Su?" The girl was stunned. She respectfully answered, "Disciple is named Su." The voice became silent again. After a long time, the voice let out a sigh and said, "You can leave." With that, there was a sudden change in the sky, as if there was an invisible hand that waved in the air. The three were pushed far away by an unstoppable wind. The middle-aged man felt even more horrified. Just at that moment, he felt like his entire body was imprisoned. If this senior wanted to kill him, he wouldn't even be able to react. Out of fear, he immediately grabbed his junior brother and sister and rushed away as fast as possible without a word when the restricting force around them was gone. He was afraid that the senior would change their mind, so he used all of his strength to get away. After the three left, the cliff covered with vegetation started to shake until all of the vegetation fell off, revealing a dark cave. A young male with hair all the way to his waist slowly walked out. His face was white and his eyes sparkled. The moment he walked out of the cave, all of the wild beasts started to whine. Their eyes begged for mercy. The long-haired youth was about 20 years old. His gaze was cold as he looked at all of the beasts. He remained silent as he looked toward the Hangyue mountain with regret in his heart. He was Wang Lin, who had been in closed-door cultivation for 4 years. Wang Lin's eyes lit up. He muttered to himself, "I have reached the peak of chi condensation a long time ago, but reaching foundation building is simply too hard. I have already tried it many times, but am still unable to break through. Situ, will the method you mentioned really help me reach foundation building faster?" "Yes. Have you decided to use my method?" Situnan let out a proud smile. "I told you before, while reaching the foundation building stage is hard, if you use my method, it will succeed for sure." A cold light flashed through Wang Lin's eyes. He said, "But I can't even beat someone at the foundation building stage. How could I catch one alive?" Situnan let out a laugh and said, "You can rest assured, because you have me here. This time, in order to help you reach foundation building, I'll take another risk and use my technique again. As long as you can find me an opening, I can help you restrain the person. You better find someone who has just reached foundation building so I won't have to waste too much essence." Wang Lin pondered for a while, then let out a sigh. He wryly smiled. "Situ, this foundation stealing is very vicious. Whoever I steal from will surely die, so let's wait and see first." Situnan said, with discontent, I have told you countless times that, in the world of cultivation, the strong prey on the weak. Killing others for your own benefit is completely normal. With your current merciful nature, how long will it take you reach spirit transformation? Humph, if you don't want to use my method, you can also go look for wood element. If you can fill the heaven-defying bead with wood element, the upgrade should give you enough spiritual energy to reach foundation building. If you won't do either of those, and don't have a nascent soul cultivator to help you, don't even think about reaching foundation building." Wang Lin pondered for a while, then said, "I wonder how other people reach foundation building." Situnan grunted and said, "It's simple. If they have a sect, then a nascent soul cultivator uses their own cultivation to help the disciple reach foundation building. If I still had my body, I could do the same and help you. In my home country, The status of a nascent soul cultivator is like that of a core formation cultivator here. Although there aren't too many, there are enough to help the disciples to reach foundation building. Chapter 73, Tianshui City. Wang Lin took a deep breath. In these 4 years, he had reached the peak of qi condensation in 2 years. He spent the remaining years trying to reach foundation building, but didn't have any success. But because he kept trying to break into foundation building, the gap between his real body and his cultivation level became a lot smaller. Instead of looking like he was at the 3rd layer, he now looked like he was at the 8th layer. Wang Lin muttered, "Foundation building." His eyes flashed as he made a decision. He slapped his bag of holding and a very extravagant-looking flying sword came out. It circled around him once before stopping in front of him. Wang Lin stepped onto the flying sword. His body moved and disappeared in a beam of light. All of the beasts lying on the ground finally relaxed a bit and quickly scattered. Wang Lin went around the Hengyue mountain and quickly flew away. The mountains, plains, forests, and villages looked very small under Wang Lin as he flew past them. In the blink of an eye, the village he was born in entered his view. Wang Lin pondered for a moment, then flew past the village without even turning his head. The Hengyue mountain was located in the northern border of the country of Zhao. It was a very remote location, with most people living in small villages. Wang Lin's destination was the city 10,000 kilometers from there. The city was called Tianshui City and it was the largest city in the northern part of Zhao. Wang Lin had only heard about Tianshui City. His teacher told him that there was an army of 100,000 stationed there. Wang Lin had always wanted to go there ever since he was a kid. Before he entered the world of cultivation, his biggest dream was to make a name for himself in the state exam, then become a high-ranked official in the capital, and move his parents there as well. Wang Lin's mind echoed the wishes of his youth. He let out a smile as he flew toward the city. 10 days later, Wang Lin became confused as he floated in the air with Situnan's mocking laugh littering the air. "I saw you flying for so many days straight. I thought you knew the road, but it turns out you don't." Wang Lin snorted and said, "If it wasn't for you asking me to go into these forests, I would have found the city for sure by now." Situnan laughed. "There are many forests on the way there, so there is a chance that there are some wood elements that could be absorbed by the bead. I'm doing this for your benefit." Wang Lin was about to speak, but suddenly stopped himself. He spotted a train of wagons on the road below. Lu San, the head of the mighty escort service in Tianshui City. Although his body wasn't big, he was very powerful. He had mastered the mountain-splitting palm to a high degree, and could be considered one of the experts in Tianshui City. He normally wouldn't come out for jobs. But this time, the shipment was too important, and it attracted too much attention. That was why North family asked him to come. Lu San was an easy-going person who loved to make friends. Everyone in the escort team gave him a lot of face. He was currently proudly riding on his horse. This shipment was already delivered, and although there were many thieves on the way, they were all scared and posed no danger. The most dangerous crisis was when they were attacked by the Greenwood bandits, but when they saw that Lu San was there, they gave him face and didn't attack, making him very proud. He closed his eyes and relaxed a bit. Tianshui City was just up ahead, so this assignment by the North family could be considered complete. On a horse to the right of Lu San sat a very strong young man. He laughed and asked, "Leader, once we finish this big delivery, how much of the profit do you think the North family will give us?" A dark-faced man also said, "Leader, this shipment is so important that we should be able to get a decent part of the profit, right?" Lu San stared at them and said, "When has the North family ever cheated us? Just wait and see. No need to worry." The young man wasn't afraid. He patted his horse and said, "Okay, with leader's words, I'm relieved." The dark-faced man let out a laugh. Right before he was about to speak, his face sunk. He asked, "Leader, do you see a person standing there?" Lu San focused his gaze and saw a figure standing at the crossroad. His face also sunk. He said, "Yang Sen, ask him what's going on. If he needs help, give him some money. After all, everyone has hard time." Yang Sen's head raised. He steered his horse and charged toward the person. When he got closer, instead of slowing down, He started to charge even faster. When Lu San saw this, he frowned. Although Yang San did his job well, whenever he did something, he had to force others into a lower position. The dark-faced man let out a laugh and said that Yang San isn't afraid of charging in, but that kid really does have good horse-riding skills. The person who was standing at the cross was Wang Lin. He saw someone charge out from the train of carriages. That person quickly arrived before him. Yang San was close enough to see what the stranger looked like. Although the person was very young, he was also very calm. He admired the youth for not being scared by his speed at all. He turned his horse and grazed by Wang Lin's side. After he charged past Wang Lin, took a few steps back, clasped his hands, and said, "I'm Tianshui City's mighty escort Yang San. Does friend need any help?" Wang Lin's gaze scanned Yang San. He clasped his hands and said, "I'm looking for directions to Tianshui City. I'm sorry if I bothered you." Yang San was stunned. He looked at Wang Lin a few times, especially at Wang Lin's hands and head. He smiled and said, "No problem. Tianshui City isn't far. What is brother going to Tianshui City for?" Yang San looked at Wang Lin a bit more. By now, the carriages had caught up and a voice shouted, "Yang San, what is going on?" Yang San turned the horse and shouted, "It's a kid that doesn't know any martial arts looking for directions to Tianshui City." Lu San held the reins and quickly approached. His eyes lit up as he looked at Wang Lin and said, "Friend, what is your name?" Wang Lin clasped his hands and said, "Hello, escort leader. My name is Wang Lin. This is my first time leaving home, so I hope escort leader can tell me directions to Tianshui City." Chapter 74, Bloody Disaster. Lu San, after carefully examining Wang Lin, suddenly asked, "Are you a student rushing here to take the exam?" Wang Lin's expression remained calm. He shook his head and said, "I'm not here for the exam. I have some skill in the craft and would like to make a living in the city." Lu San relaxed a bit. His question had a deep meaning. It was almost time for the state exam, so a lot of local villages sent students to the city to take the exam. However, all of those students would carry a box holding writing materials, but Wang Lin was carrying nothing. If he admitted that he was a student here for the exam, he would have to be wary of this person. But Lu San didn't take this too seriously. He laughed and said, "What a coincidence. We are also heading toward Tianshui City. Friend, how about you travel with us?" A grateful look washed over Wang Lin's face. He said, "Thank you, escort leader." The dark-faced man looked at Wang Lin and laughed. "Kid, can you ride a horse?" Wang Lin wryly smiled and shook his head. Lu San pointed at the carriage behind him and said, "What is there to thank me for? Everyone has a hard time when they are out traveling. Young man, there are only 4 days left until we reach the city." Wang Lin clasped his hands. Without a word, he got on the carriage. He looked behind him and saw dozens of similar carriages. He scanned them with his divine sense and found them to all be empty. He didn't bother with it anymore and sat down cross-legged. Yang San reined his horse and walked next to Wang Lin. He asked, "Friend, how come you don't have any luggage for your travels?" Wang Lin sighed and shook his head. He said, "I met robbers on the way." Yang San was stunned. He looked at Wang Lin for a while, then said, "Keeping your life is more important. This area hasn't been safe recently." As they were talking, Wang Lin's expression suddenly changed. He raised his head and looked toward the forest in front of him. He expanded his divine sense and found 2 people hiding there, staring at the caravan. Even after the caravan passed, those 2 they still didn't do anything, so Wang Lin didn't say anything and ignored them. After a day of travel, the sun was starting to set and night was about to come. Lu San shouted from the front, "Boys, we will reach the Tianshui City area tomorrow and the North family will send someone to greet us. Today, we won't be able to find any lodging, so we will camp out here to rest for a bit, then set out early tomorrow morning. Once we reach the city, I'll take you boys to the Red Ice Palace to find you some pretty girls to play with." All of the guys let out laughs, then got off their horses. They formed a circle with the wagons and tied the horses to the wagons. After that, they pitched their tents. Some went to sleep while others started drinking. The atmosphere became very lively. There were also 3 to 5 people taking turns patrolling the area. After Wang Lin got off the carriage, Yang Sen pulled him aside to a campfire. During their day of conversing, Yang Sen found that he really liked Wang Lin and bragged a lot about his deeds to him. The more interested Wang Lin seemed in his story, the more excited he got while talking about them. That was why he dragged Wang Lin to talk the moment the group stopped to rest. There were 3 people sitting next to the fire. Besides the escort head Lu San and the dark-faced man, there was also a middle-aged scholar-looking man. He wore a blue robe, his skin was pale, and he had a broad forehead, but his eyes revealed an intelligent light. Seeing Wang Lin arriving, Lu San laughed. "Sir, this is the little brother I was telling you about, the one going to Tianshui City to make a living." With that, he said to Wang Lin, "Little brother, this is our mighty escorts Mr. Wang. You are also named Wang, so you guys must have some relation. You guys should talk. Mr. Wang is a very knowledgeable person who has seen a lot of things." The middle-aged scholar laughed softly and said, "Lao Lu, you don't need to brag for me. What I know isn't considered much." Lu San rolled his eyes and said, "Says who? If you are a small person, then I am nothing. Little brother, this Mr. Wang is a living immortal. He knows everything up and down. His ability to tell fortunes is beyond amazing." Wang Lin carefully looked at the middle-aged man. He smiled and said, "Sir, you are full of energy and your eyes shine brightly. You are obviously a very intelligent person." The middle-aged scholar gave Wang Lin a surprised look and said, "It seems little brother is the same as me? I see that little brother looks like a scholar, but hides a dragon inside. Your future will not be average." Wang Lin smiled and said, "My village's teachers also talked about fortune-telling. After listening for a while, I also learned a bit." The middle-aged scholar let out a laugh. The dark-faced man quickly said, "Mr. Wang, check mine as well. I'm already getting old. Will I have any luck with marriage?" Lu San laughed. "How many times have you asked on this trip already? Every time Mr. Wang checks for someone, it takes a lot of energy, so just forget about it." The dark-faced man ignored Lu San's words and stared at the middle-aged scholar. The middle-aged scholar pondered a little, then answered, "Fine, I'll check for you. Yang Sen, weren't you asking me as well? I'll check for both of you." Having said that, he closed his eyes. When he reopened them, they were shining a golden light. Wang Lin's expression remained the same, but his heart faltered. He spread out his divine sense and found that there was a sliver of spiritual energy moving inside the middle-aged man. The spiritual energy moved in a strange path and arrived at the middle-aged man's eyes. The middle-aged man stared at the dark-faced man. He was muttering some words, as if he was calculating something, and his hand formed a seal. His face turned red as he said, while frowning, "Lulea, there is a bloody disaster in your future. If you can get past it, you will get married 3 months after the event." The black-faced man was stunned. "A disaster? No problem. Us escorts live in danger, so having to deal with a bloody battle is normal," he responded. The middle-aged man turned his gaze to Yang Sen. His expression changed. He said, "Strange. Why do you also have a bloody ray representing disaster?" With that, he quickly looked at Lu San and his face became dark and said, "Something is wrong. This technique passed down by my family has never been wrong. Lao Lu, you also have the sign of a bloody disaster." With that, he stood up with a serious expression and looked at the surrounding people. His face became even more serious. "Lao Lu, I think something is wrong. I see that everyone here has the ray of a bloody disaster. This can't be a coincidence," said the middle-aged scholar. Lu San's eyes narrowed. He looked around, then asked, "Sir, do you mean to say that we will soon have to face a bloody disaster?" The middle-aged scholar nodded. After his eyes swept past Wang Lin, he was stunned. He carefully looked at Wang Lin and his expression suddenly changed. His face turned red and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face revealed a look of fear. He pointed at Wang Lin and burst out, "You!" Chapter 75, Encountering the Enemy Again. Lu San and the group was stunned. They had never seen the middle-aged man act like this. He secretly moved a few steps away from Wang Lin and asked, "Sir, what about this little brother? Is he going to encounter that bloody disaster because of us?" Wang Lin's expression was calm. He looked at the middle-aged man, but didn't say a word as Situnan's lazy voice floated into his ears. This little baby is kind of interesting. His fortune-telling technique is pretty good. When it comes to normal people, he is able to see signs of their future, but when he wants to look into the future of us cultivators, it's like struggling in the water. I sent him some memories of me wiping out a sect and he can't handle it anymore. In just one breath of time, the middle-aged scholar was covered in sweat. His gaze toward Wang Lin was no longer neutral, but filled with fear. He heard Lu San's words and quickly said, "Nothing to do with little brother. My skill isn't good enough. I can't see through it, can't see through it." With that, he repeatedly bowed with a bitter look on his face. The scene he saw before had already completely stunned him. That was not a normal world, but a hell filled with blood. Those people in the scene were obviously not mortals. They were able to fly in the sky and destroy mountains. The middle-aged man grew up learning the fortune-telling technique, so he knew that immortals existed. He also knew that he mustn't get involved, or he will die. Lu San frowned and was about to speak when he suddenly heard scream. A head flew through the area and landed on the ground. It rolled until it stopped next to the fire. Lu San's expression changed greatly. He quickly stood up as he realized that this head belonged to someone who was patrolling the area. Yang San grabbed the head. He clenched his fist and said, "Ergo, brother will get revenge for you." All of the guards took out their weapons and their killing intent spread to the surroundings. The dark-faced man stood next to Lu San and asked, "Who are you? Seems like you guys don't understand the rules at all." A dark laugh came from the distance. Following a rustling sound, dozens of black-clothed men appeared from the ground. They patted the dirt off their clothes as they stared at everyone. Mountain-splitting palm Lu San, give us the thing and we will leave immediately. Otherwise, no one will leave here alive. A skinny and old man walked out of the group of black-clothed men. Lu San's face was as calm as water. He said, "I was wondering who it was. It seems it's the vulture escort." The old man let out a laugh. "Man named Lu, there is no need to say pointless things. Your mighty escort officially went to carry out a shipment, but secretly brought back a 500-year-old ginseng. If you surrender it, you will all be safe. Don't let such a thing endanger your life." Lu San frowned. He looked at the people around him and thought, how does the vulture escort know that I was hiding the ginseng? It seems there are people in the same business with greedy hearts. With that, his gaze fell on Wang Lin and he sneered. He glanced at the dark-faced man. He clenched his hand and said, with a deep voice, "Whether or not I have the ginseng, are you going to steal it from me with your inferior martial arts skills?" The dark-faced man got the message and secretly got behind Wang Lin. Wang Lin frowned. The middle-aged man quickly stopped the dark-faced man and said, "What are you doing? This little brother isn't the enemy." The dark-faced man was stunned and was unable to respond. Just at that moment, the old man let out a laugh. "Man named Lu, I can't beat you, but our boss is going to act personally. You are a dead man." With that, he took a few steps back and said, "The boss has arrived." He immediately bowed on the ground. All of the black-clothed men became very excited. They all did the same as the old man and shouted, "The boss has arrived." A cold voice suddenly came from all sides. "Bring out the ginseng, or you will die." The moment the voice arrived, a fist-sized fireball flew into the circle of carriages. The extremely hot fireball hit one of the escort members. Before he could even scream, he was burned to death. At that moment, everyone in the escort was stunned. Some of them even lost their grips on their weapons and dropped them on the ground. Yang San's eyes revealed a look of fear. What weapon is that?" he shouted. Heat surged around the fire, making the escort guards understand just how hot the fire was. Lu San's face was filled with shock. He took a few steps back and stared at the burned body, unable to say a word. The dark-faced man's eyes revealed extreme fear. He said, while trembling, immortal technique?" The dark-faced man took the test to enter a sect when he was a kid. After he failed, he entered the martial arts world. The test was deeply ingrained in his mind, so when he saw the fireball, he immediately made the connection. The old man revealed a proud expression and said, "Of course our boss is an immortal. Why don't you quickly hand the ginseng over to us? All of the members of the escort looked at Lu San. Their eyes revealed a cry for help. If it was normal people, they would have the courage to fight, but this was an immortal. All of the escort guards lost their will to fight. Lu San revealed a bitter look. He was about to speak when 3 more fireballs appeared in the air, motionless. Wang Lin's eyes lit up and he became very interested. From the looks of the fireballs, the person who was casting them couldn't have been higher than a 3rd layer. He touched his chin and sent out his divine sense. He quickly found the person on a large tree not far away. "What is this?" Wang Lin muttered. He was stunned. The person was about 20 years old and was at the peak of the 2nd layer. He could almost break into the 3rd layer. The young man's face was gloomy and was covered in scars. At first glance, he looked very ferocious, but the more Wang Lin looked, the more familiar he looked. The middle-aged scholar sighed. "Lao Lu, give it to them. Even if the North family finds out, they wouldn't blame us. The enemy is an immortal. How could us mortals defend against him?" Lu San hesitated for a bit, then helplessly took out a small case and placed it on the ground. The moment the case landed on the ground, it rose into the air. However, it didn't fly to the vulture escort people, but into Wang Lin's hand.